And today I want to start by just giving you three kind of what I think are models of parenting to start us out with. First of all, in your outlines, I want you to look at the absent parent. The absent parent, which I believe today, unfortunately, is epidemic because kids today, oftentimes, 40% in America of the kids today either lack a mom or a dad at home. And the epidemic is even more so when it's an absent mom or dad socially, emotionally, rather than just literally. But there are huge numbers of children who are being raised up in homes where either a parent is not there due to abandonment or divorce, or where the parents are there but aren't. You know what I mean by that? They are there but aren't. Oftentimes in our generation, because of the fact that you have two parents who are career-driven. In the 50s and 60s, women used to complain about the career-driven husband. Unfortunately, when you got to the 80s and 90s, rather than that excess being corrected, what happened was women joined that pursuit. And as we move into the 21st century, I think for a lot of young children growing up right here at the beginning of the 21st century, what we're going to find later on is that not only do a lot of children suffer from the absent father wound, but will also suffer in the next generation from the absent mother wound. Mom just wasn't there. But that's one style of parenting, the absent parent. On the other hand, there's some healthy things happening in our country today, and that's what I call the engaged parent. That's number 2, engaged parenting, which I think represents a healthy new resurgence of parental involvement in children's lives that's occurring right now in our country, and that's good seeing moms and dads realize the importance of being close to their children, involved in their schoolwork, involved in their social relationships, attending their games, just being an overall part of their life, which gives weight to a child's life growing up. That's such a healthy thing, and it's so encouraging to see many children today get a new closeness of time and attention with mom and dad because they figured it out. They figured out that a kid just can't raise his or herself, that they need that closeness of proximity. They need time and attention to grow up healthy and whole. But I think there's a third kind of parenting, and quite frankly, I think the third type is the best type. I'm going to call it strategic parenting. It's a style of parenting that not only engages a son or daughter with time and attention, but also equips a son or daughter with the most important issues of life, so that when they go out in life, they go out confident about life. This week and next week, I want to address some specific ways a dad can be strategic with his son, and then next week, strategic with his daughter. And as you know, throughout men's fraternity, we have made one important point over and over again, and that is dad, for a child, is destiny. Dad's destiny. His presence or lack of it has no rival when it comes to shaping the formative beginnings of a child's life. For a son, dad is and dad always will be a powerful reality in a child's life. I like what country singer Kenny Loggins said not too long ago. He said this. He says, "Are we ever really free from the gravitational pull of the moon? Can a son ever stop needing his father's love? I don't think so. As I see it, this is simply emotional physics." And I tell you, when it comes to that incredible closeness between a father and son and what goes on there, there is some emotional physics that will occur that last for a lifetime. I think maybe some of us saw that a number of years ago in the life of the great basketball player Michael Jordan. As many of you know, during one of the seasons, championship seasons for the Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan's dad was murdered tragically. And at the end of that year, as it came down to the end and the Bulls won another NBA championship, at the end of that game, Michael Jordan ran out on the court and grabbed the basketball and fell down in a fetal position. I don't know if you remember that. And began to sob uncontrollably. Now here was a guy who had it all. He had fame, he had money, he had superstardom. He had everything but what he wanted most in this moment. Because in this moment, as he hugged that ball and squeezed it tight, he was hoping he could squeeze out just one more moment with Dad. And I remember as he laid there on the court, and it kind of lingered, and after a while, it became awkward, even for the announcers, while everybody else was celebrating, seeing Michael Jordan down there in a fetal position on the court crying. One of the announcers finally kind of awkwardly said, well, obviously this is a private moment for Michael. And I thought to myself, no, it's not private. It's primal. This is emotional physics at work. This is a son wanting his dad and wanting to hear from his dad just one more time. Good job, Michael. But not being able to possess it. All he could possess in that moment was a basketball. You know, the scriptures are very clear about this emotional physics. In Proverbs 17:6, here's what it says. It says, the glory of sons is their fathers. And for a son, Dad will always be this extremely powerful reality, whether he's conscious of it or not. It'll surface from time to time, though. Dad is always there. And as we've mentioned several times, every son needs to hear at least 3 things from his dad over his lifetime. To have, in a sense, that weight in his body from Dad. He needs to hear these 3 phrases. First of all, son, I love you. He needs to hear that verbally, specifically, face to face, eyeball to eyeball. He needs to hear from his dad, son, I'm proud of you. And he needs to hear from his dad, son, you're good at, and whatever he's good at, the blank needs to be filled in. He needs to feel that from Dad. I told you even Jesus needed that. As you go through the pages of the New Testament over the life of Jesus, there are 6 times God the Father breaks into time and space, and we hear His voice verbally speak to Jesus Christ. And it's interesting, on every one of those occasions, He says pretty much the same thing. He says to Jesus these words, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to Him. And in that moment, we hear this affirmation, this commendation from a father to his son that's so desperately needed by the man, Jesus Christ. This is my beloved Son. I love you. In whom I am well pleased. I'm proud of you. Listen to Him, telling those around Him, because this man has something to say. He's good. Jesus Christ needed that, and if Jesus Christ needed that, how much more do fathers need to give that to their sons in this very difficult journey towards manhood? A strategic father, not just an engaged father, not one who just hangs around his son and attends his ball games and takes him on some hunting trips. All that is good stuff between a father and son, but it's not the most strategic stuff. Within those activities and that presence, there needs to be deposited specific and strategic thoughts, information, and empowerment that makes him be able to stand in the storm of life later on. And those 3 phrases are just part of that adventure of a strategic father who will speak those words often to his son. But you know what? A strategic dad will also do other things, and that's what we want to look at this morning. Important things, life-shaping things. I've listed them on your outline as the 3 ingredients of strategic fatherhood. Ingredients that I think make a son healthy, confident, and clear in life. And I want to present these 3 ingredients using a metaphor, the metaphor of volleyball. Now, I'm not sure how many of you guys played volleyball. I never did, but except for just the recreational kinds of things. But you don't have to play volleyball very long to know that there are 3 key moves in volleyball. There is the dig. It's that person getting down the dirt to pull that ball up for his teammates. There is the set, where you set it up for the net. And then there's that other strategic move called the spike, where you jam it home and score the point. Strategic fatherhood, in some ways, can be compared to the game of volleyball around those three moves. I want to give them for you as definitions. First, for a dad, a strategic dad, the dig is dad's compelling character. Every son, listen guys, every son wants to be like his dad, at least for a time, until dad disappoints, until dad pulls back or pulls out. In the beginning, every son wants to be like his dad. And the dig is this. The dig is that you as a dad must have a life worth wanting. And that's hard, dirty work. That's not something that you can go out in a weekend seminar and get in a notebook. That's not something that just immediately happens. That's not some kind of phrase you can throw out to your son on occasion and he finally gets it. The dig is you getting down in the everyday dirt of life, the hard-edged, pressurized frenzy of the 21st century, and living in such a way that your life would be in some ways compelling to your son. He would look at you by the choices you make. He would look at you by the way you react and interact in certain specific situations. He would look at you and see how you handle certain moral dilemmas. And in those dirty digs, he would see a life worth wanting to emulate. A dig cannot be taught. A dig is character that's caught. A number of years ago, I read the following article in Reader's Digest that I think really illustrates this point called the dig. The article was entitled Catch of a Lifetime. Let me just read it to you and you'll get the point. It says, he was 11 years old and went fishing every chance he got from the dock at his father's cabin on the island in the middle of the New Hampshire lake. On the day before the bass season opened, he and his father were fishing early in the evening, catching sunfish and perch with worms. Then he tied on a small silver lure and practiced casting. The lure struck the water and caused colored ripples in the sunset, then silver ripples as the moon rose over the lake. When his pole doubled over, he knew something huge was on the other end. His father watched with admiration as the boy skillfully worked the fish alongside the dock. Finally, he gingerly lifted the exhausted fish from the water. It was the largest one he had ever seen, but it was a bass. The boy and his father looked at the handsome fish, gills playing back and forth in the moonlight. The father lit a match and looked at his watch. It was 10 p.m., 2 hours before bass season opened. He looked at the fish and then at the boy. "You'll have to put it back, son," he said. "Dad," cried the boy. "There will be other fish," his father said. "Not as big as this one," cried the boy. He looked around the lake. No other fishermen or boats were anywhere around in the moonlight. He looked again at his father, and even though no one had seen them, nor could anyone ever know what time he caught the fish, the boy could tell by the clarity of his father's voice that the decision was not negotiable. He slowly worked the hook out of the lip of the huge bass and lowered it back into the black water. The creature swished its powerful body and disappeared. The boy suspected that he would never again see such a great fish, at least not in his arms. That was 34 years ago. Today, the boy is a successful architect in New York City. His father's cabin is still there, on the island in the middle of the lake. He takes his own sons and daughters fishing from the same dock. But he was also right. He never again caught such a magnificent fish as the one he landed that night long ago. But he does see that same fish again and again, every time when he comes up against the question of ethics. For as his father taught him, ethics are simple matters of right and wrong. It's only the practice of ethics that is difficult. Do we do what is right when no one is looking? Do we refuse to cut corners to get the design in on time, or refuse to trade stocks based on information we know we're not supposed to have? We would if we were taught early in life to put the fish back when we were young. For we would have learned this essential truth, not about how we had a chance to beat the system and took it, but about how Dad taught us the right thing. And as a result, we were forever strengthened. It's a great story, isn't it? It's a great story of what I call the dig. And the dig in life is Dad's compelling character. And listen, guys, here's a hard truth. It's dirty. It's a dirty truth. It's down in the dirt kind of truth. And that's this. Your sons will leave with what you have lived out in your home. That's the bottom line for guys. Dad's compelling character. Secondly, the set. Setting a son up in life. What's the set? It's Dad's clear instruction. Stephen Covey, in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, mentioned that one of the essential habits of life for successful people is that they begin any enterprise with the end in mind. Every dad should ask this question: what essential information do I want my son to leave home with at the end? We've mentioned this before, but as he drives away, and you've shaken his hand or hugged his neck and said, "Son, be a man," and now his car is disappearing over the horizon, what does he leave home with? That's the end. And every strategic dad begins his interaction with his son with that end in mind. And so, what are the things that you want to have your son leave home with that gives weight and substance and strategic value to his life? Certainly we want good memories of fun activities. But guys, I want to tell you, there's got to be more than that. A strategic dad asks these questions. What do I want my son to leave home with concerning information about manhood or about his role with a woman? Does he understand that? Or about money? Or about particular social skills, whether it's just in life in general with a woman in particular? How to work? Have I taught him how to work? How to be on time? How to clean up his room? How to get up for himself and take initiative in life? What does he know about God that I imparted into his life? What does he know about sex that I imparted into his life, or about life in general? Every time Dad gives some clear, hands-on instruction about life, here's what he does for that son. He sets him at the net. He sets him up for success. It's called the set. And then finally, there's the spike. And I'm going to call the spike Dad's creative ceremonies for his sons, which we'll spend a lot of time on here this morning, which I think are done by the dad for his son to mark his progress towards manhood. It's the moment where not only does he set him up in life, but he kind of drives the principle home about what it means to be a man and how that son is making progress towards manhood. You know, one of the things that I'd love to do in men's fraternity for men across the country is bring back the power of ceremony. It's been lost today. I've asked the question to audiences all across the country: when is it that you became a man, and how did you know? It's a good question. I remember asking a businessman the other day on the plane that question. And at the end of our conversation, he told me, he said, "I would have loved to have had a moment where I knew I had been commissioned into manhood." Just a moment. And I call that the power of ceremonies. You know, as a pastor, I get to do ceremonies all the time of different kinds. Just this last Sunday night, I did a ceremony called baptism, which is a ceremony marking a change in life from a person from a life lived by themselves without God to living with God. It just kind of marks that moment. Some of the ceremonies that we've done here at the church for different events have been very elaborate. Some have been absolutely hilarious. Even some that weren't so supposed to be funny, like a wedding that I did a number of years ago where we were down here, and it was one of those huge formal weddings, you know, where, almost an uncontrollable budget as far as the amount of money that was spent on this wedding. And right here at this end was, at the end, as everybody marched out with the processional at the end, or the recessional, I should say, was the last groomsman. And down here was the last bridesmaid. Now this bridesmaid down on this end looked like she weighed about 95 pounds. She was the most feminine, soft, small individual of the whole wedding. And down here was this pretty big, burly guy, and he was supposed to usher her out. Only problem is he had locked his legs through the whole ceremony. And it was just a little bit warm. And after everybody was out and we were just about to clap at the end of the wedding, he came to get her. And as he started coming here, I could tell he was white as a sheet and his glasses were down on his nose. And his eyeballs were rolled back into his head. And suddenly as he was walking towards her, he started leaning forward and then he just started running. And she was here with her little bouquet, 95 pounds, waiting for him. And she was paralyzed and he got faster and faster and then he hit her like a linebacker, right up under the chin and put her right up over the first row, and her legs were sticking out. Some ceremonies are hilarious like that. But let me tell you, they're all powerful. They all have a unique communication to them because that's the whole essence of a ceremony. A ceremony is a sacred seal about something. It seals in a way that few things can, a change in life. And because of the investment of time and attention and money in it, it creates importance and an unforgettable memory. That's what ceremonies are all about. I remember reading a book by George Duby on knights. And it was said that when a young man came to that moment after all his training where he kneeled before the king and he felt the blade on his shoulders knighting him, Duby makes this comment. He said, when a young man was dubbed, it was the finest moment of his life. It was the ceremony in which he knew without a doubt he had passed over into a new stage of life. Did you know every boy needs that moment? He needs to know that he's coming over the bar into a new stage called manhood. How does he get there? How does he get there in America today? Did you know there is no moment unless a strategic dad makes the moment? I want to give you just real briefly 5 characteristics of memorable ceremonies so that you can have this, and then we'll talk about doing manhood ceremonies with sons. Here are the 5 characteristics of memorable ceremonies. First, memorable ceremonies are costly. They're costly. The more time, the more thought, the more planning, the more cost, the better. That just goes part and parcel. One goes with the other. The more you invest in it, the grander it is, the greater memory it makes. Secondly, memorable ceremonies always ascribe value to the person being celebrated. The fact that you would take the time to go to their wedding, or take the time to show up at their baptism, or take the time to come to their graduation, that's what makes it meaningful. It ascribes value to the person being celebrated. You've created this ceremony in which by being there with them and going through this enterprise, you're telling that person, you're important. That's why I came. This moment is important. That's why I came. And the circumstances are worth taking the time to ascribe value in this moment to your life. Thirdly, memorable ceremonies always employ symbols. Have you noticed that? Weddings have rings. Graduation is symbolized with a cap and gown and a diploma. When a man is promoted in the military, he gets gold bars. When retirement comes, he gets some gift. We've all often called it the gold watch. But it's a symbol to remind them of this unforgettable moment. I mentioned to you about the anniversaries that I like to make memories with my wife. And our 20th wedding anniversary is one of the most memorable. And the reason it's one of the most memorable is because of the diamond necklace she wears around her neck. That cost me a lot. But it made an unforgettable moment that she remembers because it symbolized every time she puts that necklace around her neck. All great memorable ceremonies employ symbols. Fourthly, memorable ceremonies involve others who are significant to the person being celebrated. The old adage, the more the merrier, applies here. When my daughter was being inducted into the who's who of colleges and universities, it was a ceremony midweek, and she told us we didn't need to come. But it was interesting when we actually went and surprised her with our presence there that the head of the department, the English department, had showed up. We were there, some friends were there. And though the ceremony was simple, and there were a few students who were there all by themselves, it felt so much different when they were inducted than when my daughter was inducted with all the significant others in her life there with her. Because it gives such value to the person in the moment. And then lastly, memorable ceremonies always empower a life with vision. A wedding ceremony empowers a life with a vision of one rather than two. You don't ever see a guy after a wedding, he's walked out, he's standing out there after the wedding has taken place, turn to his friend and say, "Does this mean I can't date?" That wouldn't make any sense, would it? Or if it did, it'd be tragic. But the point is in the wedding, he understands that he gave his life away. And that what this means is I've entered a whole new lifestyle where the goal is two becoming one, not one still shopping around for more. The same way when you have a fraternity initiation, it says we've changed. You've got a whole new social group that you're committed to. Or a graduation envisions the fact that no longer are you going to be dependent on mom and dad and having them pay tuition and things like that for your college. You're on your own now. You got to get a job. You have to work. It's the same way with a manhood ceremony. A manhood ceremony of different kinds says to the son, you're entering a new stage of life. That new stage has some new responsibilities attached to it. It envisions for you a new way of thinking.